You are listening to the Booktrospective Podcast, a podcast for all types of books. And even though we read all types of books across all different types of genres, we want to give a disclaimer. Many of our books and a lot of our content sometimes is intended for mature audiences. And we don't believe in censorship, but we do want our listeners to have the opportunity to decide if our episode or podcast is good for them. So with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Dominique.
And Keely.
And you are listening to Booktrospective. And this week we are doing No, I don't know what's going on here. This week we are doing part 1 of Crescent City 2, or House and Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. Obviously, I just said it was part 1, so I've already told you guys multiple times, but all of these more recent Sarah J. Maas books, they have to be 2 parts. They are 800 pages or whatever. I don't know. They're super long, and there's just absolutely no way. But before we get into that, Keely, how was your week?
Honestly, it was good. I was about to say, honestly, I can't really remember my week. My week's been good. Uneventful. I mean, other than book club yesterday, but...
Love book club. We read something weird. That's
well,
okay.
Yeah.
It was strange. I'm okay with it.
Quite strange.
Very strange.
But...
what did I do this week? I have no idea. I'm off from one of my jobs, and that always makes my life strange. And I'm getting ready to go on my honeymoon, so I'm also, my entire house is filled with boxes that I need to get gone since the wedding, and I don't know where they're gonna go. And also suitcases and trying to get my kids ready, and my life is in shambles and chaos. But that's how I normally function. Oh, and I told Keely I'm going back to school because I don't have enough degrees or anything. So what's one more? I don't know. Sure. Yeah, sure. It's only for a year. It'll be quick. So that's what I'm doing. I don't know. But, all right. So do we have the blurb?
I do. Bryce Quinlan and Hunt Athalar are trying to get back to normal. They may have saved Crescent City, but with so much upheaval in their lives lately, they mostly want a chance to relax, slow down, and figure out what the future holds. The Asteri have kept their word so far, leaving Bryce and Hunt alone, but with the rebels chipping away at the Asteri's power, the threat the rulers pose is growing. As Bryce, Hunt, and their friends get pulled into the rebels' plans, the choice becomes clear: stay silent while others are oppressed, or fight for what's right. And they've never been very good at staying silent. In this sexy action-packed sequel to the #1 bestseller House of Earth and Blood, Maas weaves a captivating story of a world about to explode and the people who will do anything to save it.
It's a mouthful. It's okay. So, if you could describe this book in one word, could you? I don't know. I have a word. It is idiot. Because that is what I scream so many times when I read this book. You idiot.
My word is wow. That's yeah.
Keely was texting me. She was like, I think this, and I just sent different emojis each time because I've already read it. So I'm like, as she works through her process. So this is the second book of the Crescent City series, which again started as a 3-book series, I believe has been added, or a 4th book has been added. So just a brief recap of Earth and Blood, because this is the second book, and if you're here, we spoil things. I'm just recapping that in my general summary, I guess. But so House of Earth and Blood follows Bryce Quinlan and Hunt Athalar. Bryce had her world turned upside down, and her best friend and lots of her friends were murdered, and basically she becomes the key to what truly happened to them, if I say it without summary. And so really book 1, it wraps up nicely. It could have ended there and been nothing else. But we go on to book 2, and book 2 does not wrap up nicely, just as a forewarning. But just a kind of a general summary. We open right back up with Hunt and Bryce. It has been 3 months since the last book ended. And they're trying to live like the most normal life that they can. One, because they want to live a normal life, but two, because they were basically threatened by like their rulers, like lay low or else you'll be seeing us. But of course they can't do that because like, even though Hunt would love to, Bryce is just like a notorious busybody and like cannot, and especially if anything comes up about Danica, which is her best friend that was murdered in the first book. So they find themselves involved in like various things that are going on that are against the Asteri or their rulers. And of course we see all of the characters that we knew and loved from the first book. We see Ruhn, her brother. We see Hypaxia, who is the queen of the witches. We get Ethan, who is a wolf and was Connor's younger brother, who Connor and Bryce kind of like would have had a thing. Danica's mom comes back in this book. Therian is in this book again. He is the mayor C agent guy or whatever. But we are introduced to lots of new characters. Hunt gets a new boss in this book and doesn't know what to do with her. We are introduced to the Triari from Sandriel, and these are like the goon squad. We have Pollux, who is the hammer. We have Lydia, the hind, the harpy, the hellhound. His name is Baxi. And there's also a hawk, but we don't get introduced to them. And so they're like terrorizing the city because they come from like blood and tear shed and all that stuff. And like Lunathian normally is pretty cool and calm. So they're like trying to balance all these things while being involved in lots of sneaky little sneak things that they're not supposed to be in. And this book again does not end nice and like wrapped up with a bow. We really end on a major cliffhanger and also a like major reveal for the people who love Sarah J. Maas. So that's really all I can say that's like spoiler free. There's not a lot. Are there triggers for this book? I'm sure that there are. I sent Keely this video about the LaCroix, what was it, LaCroix,
or whatever.
And he literally was like rubbing on an orange and just and I was like, that's how I said it's the essence of what a taste should be. That is so funny. I was cracking up. That's fine.
Water snobs over here.
Absolute.
I have my little ice maker back there, and I'm like,
Someone
I'm not putting anything but spring water.
Oh,
I have my
yes.
ice mountain going in the ice machine. And
Someone posted like Dasani changed their packaging to like a lighter blue, and they're like, you can change your packaging, and I'm still not drinking it because I'm not like
I swear.
Change your formula. Change your formula to just water, actually.
Right? I'd rather drink like muddy water from the side of the road.
I hate Dasani.
So, trigger warnings: alcohol, blood, child abuse mentioned, death camps briefly visited, decapitation, demons, drugs. This other word, I have no idea what it is. Gun violence, murder, profanity, sexual assault, sexually explicit scenes, which it's Sarah J. Maas. Like, come on, you guys.
Yeah.
Skeletons, slavery, terrorism, and violence.
Skeleton in this book?
Did
I miss the skeletons? Huh. Maybe as I go through this.
Probably. Are they referring to the Reapers?
Maybe. Okay. Because I'm like, did I miss the skeleton? Because I'm like, what is that? But, okay, well. If you have not read Crescent City 1, Earth and Blood, if you have not read Sky and Breath, this book, maybe if you've read any of the Akatar books and you don't want to be spoiled, this is your notice to pause and come back later. If not, we're going to go ahead and dive in. And before we do, because I want to say it now, not just at the end, please make sure that you share this episode with all of your friends and like and follow us on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I was going to say book talk.
Because you want to be friends with us. Come on.
Yeah, we're cool. I think we are. We have friends. All right, so this book actually opens up with a recap of what the houses are and what that entails. I'm not going to say all that again, but just so we review, we are in the world of Midgard, and we are mainly in the city of Lunathian, which is in the country of Pangera, I believe. There are 4 houses. There is the House of Earth and Blood, which is like humans, wolf shifters, that kind of stuff. And then there's Sky and Breath, that is like the Fae and the ultra like Vanir, like the angels, I believe. There's the House of Fire and Fire and what? What is it called? Flame and Shadow, not fire or anything. The House of Flame and Shadow, which is all the dark, creepy stuff. And then there's the House of Many Waters, which is all of the water people. So there's that. So we actually open with a prologue in this book. And we are introduced to Sophie Renas, and she is at a death camp undercover looking for her brother, and we learn that she is an Ophian rebel. So we will hear that lots of times. Ophian is like the rebel organization. She is a half-human who presents as human, but she has actually made the drop, and we will learn that she is a Thunderbird, which is a species that was like hunted to extinction by the Asteri because they are super powerful. They are very similar to Hunt in the fact that they have like lightning power. But she like presents as a human, so like no one knows that she's a Thunderbird. And she is looking for her brother Emil in these camps, and she does find him, and he basically has gotten himself and like a bunch of children out of these camps. We learned that, you know, when they were searching for the Thunderbirds, basically her parents were tortured and killed by the Hind, and the Hind like has a pack of what they call dreadwolves with her. And Sophie was able to escape, but her brother has been missing for like years up until she finds him now. Pippa is the leader of the Ophian rebels, and she basically approved this plan for her to get Emil because Sophie has information that the Ophians want, and we don't know what that is. And so she's kind of using it as collateral to get what she wants, which is her brother. So she like basically like breaks out through this fence. It's an electric fence, but she's a Thunderbird, so she can do that. She was able to like black out the camp and everything, and they are racing towards this van where Agent Silverbow is, and like, he's basically like, hurry up, you know, whatever. And, like, there are dread wolves chasing them, and they get the kids away, but they surround Sophie, and she knows that they won't kill her until the Hind comes, and they don't know that she's a Thunderbird. Yeah. So as she, like, starts, like, charging up, basically, one of them does realize, and they're like, oh, she's a Thunderbird, and, like, she literally, like, erupts with, like, her, like, lightning power or whatever. And then she tries to run, but she gets caught by the Hind. And as all this is going on, Agent Silverbow gets shot with what they call Gorsian bullets, or anything Gorsian is like some kind of material that can like subdue their powers. And like the kids and everybody get on the boat and they're trying to escape, but there's like all these boats coming in. They call them like mega boats. And so she decides to stay behind to like buy them time. Pippa knows that Agent Silverbow has like feelings for Sophie and like won't leave until and Pippa won't leave until she has Emil, because she's like, if I don't get Sophie, at least I have Emil, because obviously he probably is a Thunderbird too. But so they make it, and all the other kids do, and Sophie's able to take down all the boats with like her power. And the Hind wants to know what intel did Sophie give to Ophian, and like why are they helping her. So she takes her out on this boat, and the Hind like drops this stone in the water, telling Sophie like she'll drown if she throws her in. And she's like, you know, tell me again, who did you give the intel to? And Sophie doesn't talk, and she's like, I can't believe I'm gonna get like this easy of a death. She's just gonna drown me. Like, okay, cool. And Mordok is like the Hind's number 2. He is what we'll learn is a bloodhound later in this book. But he's like, no torture or whatever. And also like the Dreadwolves and the Hind, they wear these like necklaces with like these little dagger marks on them, and it like signifies like how the people they've killed. Like the Hind has so many, like it literally looks like teeth like glinting in the night. It's crazy. And so the Hind basically says like, do you have any last words? And Sophie says, go to hell. So we open with part 1, and just like book 1, the parts are labeled as the like layers of hell. There's 7 layers. So we start at part 1 is the chasm. Bryce is at the theater to watch Juniper perform, because Juniper's her friend that is a deer shifter, and she like performs in the ballet and stuff. And like everyone's staring at her, and like basically since the spring and everything happened in the last book, that's basically what happened. And she feels bad. Like 5,000 people died, or, you know, beings died in the spring with like the whole thing with Micah and hell and all of that. And so she always feels guilty about like enjoying her life. But she's at this at the theater with her parents, with Ember and Randall, and Ember is like, why don't you tell the people they can purchase a picture, because she's so feisty. And there's like all these statues around, and one of them reminds Randall of Hunt, because it's like, it looks like Thor, basically. Like that's basically the description we got. And on the plaque, it's written in the Old Fae language, and it says the making of the sword. And there's another statue that depicts hell demons, and it gives Bryce flashbacks. But she puts on a brave face because she really doesn't want to talk to her mom about like everything that she went through. And then there's another statue that says the princess wanted to take Midgard, and her mom says, doesn't seem like anything's changed. And Bryce like doesn't tell her that like she's worked with Adis before, who is I don't remember what layer he is, but he's one of the princes of hell. So Ember basically wishes that Bryce would have got a job here at like whatever this place is versus where she got a job at, which is the Fae Archives. So obviously Ember doesn't want her anywhere near the Fae, and Jessica's building like got drowned and then maybe on fire. I don't know. So she doesn't work for Jessica anymore. And Ember doesn't want her working at the Fae Archives because she doesn't want her anywhere near her father, who basically regulates the archives. And she's like, I don't know why you can't work at the warehouse where Jessica moved all her stuff. And Bryce basically lets us know, like, she did beg Jessica for jobs like multiple times. And she's like, I don't know how many times I can like ask for a job before it's like pathetic. And like Ember's like, well, I just don't understand how like a princess can't get a job. And she says, I'm not a princess. But we do learn that the star that like erupted on Bryce's chest in the end of the last book it never went away. Like it fades, like it's not lit all the time, but there's like a tattoo basically of a star on her chest. We learned that Hunt did go back to work in the 33rd, even though he is free now, but he is the second in command to Isaiah at the Comitium. And Ember like wishes that Bryce and Hunt would just like move and live with them and be normal. And Bryce sends Hunt a picture of the statue and he says the statue has more abs than him. And she says, no, I think you do. And he's like, well, you can count them later. And he says he'll be there like soon. And he comes in, like Bryce is like, dang, he looks good in a suit. And they get champagne and Hunt pulls out this like pill and like drops it in there. He's like, don't drink it. Have to test and make sure it's not poison, which Ember loves. And she's like, okay, well now I can't drink my drink. And he's like, yeah, you can. Like it's, you know, it's tasteless and colorless and all those things. So they're sitting in this Fae section. And of course they're all staring at them. And then literally as the lights go out, Bryce's star starts to erupt. So she's like trying to cover it up and like someone's like, hey, turn off the lights. So like Hunt covers her star with her hand and her mom's like, you can't just sit there like that, but it's fine. So they, after that whole thing, they go to a party at Ruhn's, which is like the ultimate like frat party. Like I love Ruhn and Declan and Flynn. Like everyone's there. Declan is there and Declan has a boyfriend named Mark. Flynn is there. Juniper and Fury are there. We learned that after like Juniper's performance, she got a standing ovation and she's expected to be promoted to principal, which is like the head of the ballet or whatever. So Fury asked Bryce, like, how is this no sex thing going? So we learned that her and Hunt still have never had sex officially. You know, like they like barely like made out in the first book but they've decided that they're going to wait until winter solstice, which this seems to work on like our same calendar here. So it's basically like August now. They're waiting 4 more months for December for winter solstice. And we learned that Fury and Juniper are dating. And Bryce is like, I don't really know what me and Hunt are. Like, they still live together. They are together, but, like, have never, like, labeled it, basically. And Bryce has started drinking again. She's, like, able to handle it, and she does just fine with that. And she knows, like, she wants to have sex with Hunt. Hunt wants to have sex with her. But, like, they both decided they want to get to know each other. And, like, again, Bryce is feeling guilty about partying. And so we learned that they're still like laying low as the Asteri told them to. And Hunt gets an email about the new Archangel leaders. And so we learned that he says that they're not bad. So we know Micah got killed, obviously, and Sandriel got killed. So Sandriel's group needs someone new and Micah's group in Lunathia needs someone new. So Ephraim is going to be appointed to the north where Sandriel is from, and Hunt's new governor or whatever, her name is Celestina. And he says, like, she seems like more of a figurehead and supposedly is very nice, but she's never had, like, a large territory like this, so he's kind of worried, like, can she handle the job? And Bryce reminds him, like, you know, you are free, like, you don't have to work as the 33rd, and, like, you can choose not to serve her. And Bryce has been, like, exploring her starlight every week, like, with Ruhn, trying to figure out her powers. We know that she doesn't have shadow powers like Ruhn, she doesn't have fire power like her dad, so, like, really she just has the starlight and nothing else. Well, and the horn in her back. And Ruhn really doesn't know, like, how massive her power is because she does have the horn to, like, amp it up. Fury is just telling them, like, the war seems to be getting worse, like, in the other cities or whatever. And, like, basically, like, the Asteri didn't choose these leaders lightly. So whoever they picked is for good reason. So Hunt is going to a meeting with them tomorrow. And Bryce says, like, you know, you need to be an approachable asshole. So we go to the best, like, chapter ever, which is, this is the sound that's on TikTok all the time. And it's like, Ruhn Dannon knew 3 things for absolute, like, with absolute certainty. And I'm like, I love Ruhn. Like, I love Ruhn so much. So he's basically hooking up with this fawn, like, in his room. And, like, as he's, like, doing this, he's thinking about how he is technically betrothed to Mary Hypaxia, but they have not talked since the, whatever that meeting was called, the summit. And, like, Flynn comes in, like, he's basically, he's not having sex with this girl, but, like, basically. And so, like, Flynn comes in and he's like, I don't care. This is the frat house. Whatever. And Flynn's like, you need to get downstairs and, like, bring the sword or whatever. And the girl's like, oh my god. Like, oh my god. So, like, Ruhn's kind of like high or drunk or whatever, but he's like, okay, whatever. So he gets his stuff. He starts going down the stairs. He's like, what the hell? Like, what do you want? And then he feels like this weird, like, tickle kind of whatever. And Flynn has Declan's security picked up something like around the house, and it feels like a storm is brewing. And Ruhn looks for Bryce, and like as soon as he's looking for her, the front door like flies open, and it's just like darkness there. And Ruhn starts like summoning his shadows, and then Bryce and Hunt like appear like in the foyer basically of this house. And Ruhn starts thinking, like, is this a portal from hell? But it's not. But Bryce's star starts glowing. And we are introduced to Prince Cormac. He is the crown prince of Avalon, or the Avalon Fae, Avalon, whatever they want to say. And so that's, like, basically the other Fae territory, even though they all answer, I believe, to the Autumn King, but like his dad also is like a King Morbin, I think his name is. And Avalon or Avalon is very weird. It's like shrouded in mist, and you can't just show up there. Like you have to be invited there. It's a very weird place. And so he's also technically Bryce and Ruhn's cousin. So he's like Ruhn's direct cousin by his mom, but like they're all Fae, like so they're all related, basically. So Cormac comes in and says Bryce looks better than he expected and says he was invited. And they're like, by who? And Cormac looks at Ruhn and was like, he says, and I'm sorry, this is such a vulgar word. He's like, you smell like cunt. And I'm like, I'm dead. And Bryce is like, I don't want to think about my brother having sex or doing like anything. So please shut the hell up. Like I cannot take it. And Cormac tells like Bryce, like, I'm your cousin Bryce. And he's like, that's why your light is shining for me. And this is where we actually learn what the Autumn King's name is. It's Einar. We're never going to say that again, but that's the man's name if anybody cared. And Cormac says that he's here to meet his bride as decreed by her father. And she says, I'm not on the market. And Hunt like immediately is seething, like he's pissed. And Cormac says, you're an unwed Fae female who belongs to her sire until they give you away. And Ruhn is like, get the fuck out of here. Like, get out of here. And Cormac says, you've got a mouth on you, talking to Bryce. And, she's like, I am not your bride, and I never will be. And so Bryce is like, I've got to get my parents out of the city like right now before they find out about this. So everyone leaves. Cormac leaves. Fury threatens everyone because like obviously it was a party. She's like, if you even think about posting it, I will end your life. So like they're like searching the socials. Ruhn is pissed. And we learn that Cormac is not only just Ruhn's cousin, he is the cousin that tried to kill him during Ruhn's ordeal when he went and got the Star Sword. Because Cormac is obsessed with Star Princess. He like assumed he would be one. He was very obsessed. He knew he was going to get the sword. He didn't. And so Ruhn tells Bryce, like, you know, the sword is yours too. Like, you basically have more star power than me. And she says, like, okay, well, we can share it. Like, I'll get it on weekends and holidays. And Hunt says, it'll get 2 solstices. So, like, double presents. And so, like, they're basically, like asking, like, is this engagement real? And Mark is like, he'll research it. We'll learn that Mark, which is Declan's boyfriend, is like, he's like a lawyer, basically. So, somebody good to have on your side. So Bryce tells Hunt, we need to be a team. And, she goes, oh, well, we're roomies. He's like, roomies? Like, what the hell? I don't want to be your roommate. And Bryce is afraid that Celestina may want to punish Hunt to, like, set an example, like, when she comes down here and, like, that's my first order. So when they get home, they find her door wide open. And Syrinx is, like, barking, and she smells blood. And she's like, oh, my God, like, did my parents come? Did something happen? But we find Ethan, like, horribly beaten. But we switch over to Therian real fast. He is on punishment with the River Queen. He's like out on some mission in like the freezing cold water. And he's looking for a body that was supposed to be tied to like lead blocks and was left here by the Hind. And it's been 2 weeks, and we learn this body is supposed to be Sophie. So Sophie from the prologue, it's been 2 weeks since that happened. The River Queen wants her body and thinks that even dead, Sophie must be an asset. So he's like in this boat or whatever. He's at depth, like at the bottom, and he's thinking of Victoria, which was like one of Hunt's friends in like the first book, who was a wraith and got ripped out of her body and thrown in a box at the bottom of the trench. And he's like, the trench is like 15 feet deeper than like where they're at now. So like she's just down there like suffering because she's not dead. Like she's just drowning over and over again. That's horrible. So what we learn is that I don't know if they touch on this in the first book, but like Therian is miserable because he was forced to work for the River Queen because he basically slept with her daughter, and the only way to get her to sleep with him was like, oh, I love you. I plead my like fealty to you. And he thought like in the morning, like, oh, I could just like get out of that. No, they've been engaged for 10 years. He hates this lady. He doesn't really hate her, but he does not want her in any way, shape, or form. And like, why are we still doing this? Like, let him go. Let him go. But we'll get to that later. So he's like looking around on the ground of this like river or whatever, and it's like takes 3.5 hours, but he finally sees the chains, and then like he notices that the chains are like unlocked, but they go back up, and he calls the river queen and says like the shackles were unlocked, and he's like, I don't even think that Sophie reached the sea floor, and the river queen says, well, either something like got her or she's alive, and she wants him to like look for her, and says that if she's alive, she's probably looking for her brother, so find him too. So back with Bryce, she's bandaging Ethan, and what we learn is that Perry, who is, okay, so I had to look this up because like I thought Omega was like the ultimate, but it's not. So like I don't read a lot of like wolf fantasy, and obviously I know what like an alpha and a beta is, but an Omega is like the least of the pack, which I thought that was weird. Like I thought the Omega was like the penultimate, like above alpha, but it's not. So like in like wolf whatever, Omegas are like the black sheep of like the pack, they're like the scapegoat, and so that's like his friend Perry is like, she's the Omega of the pack with Amelie, and she's Amelie's younger sister. And so basically what we learn is Sabine and like the pack jumped him, and Perry brought him to Bryce's because Sabine kicked him out of the pack, and he says he has nowhere to go. And basically there was an article that came out, so Sabine was already pissed about what happened in the spring because he defied orders and helped Bryce, but then there was an article that came out about it, and he basically was like Sabine was wrong and Bryce was right. So yeah, she was pissed. And Bryce is like, I'm not a wolf. Like, why are you here? And he's like, the Prime called you a wolf. That's good enough for me. And he's like, I can leave. And they're like, you can't even open your eyes. Like, you can't even see. They're like, make him stay. So Bryce calls her parents, and she's like, look, I need you guys to go home in the morning. Like, something came up, blah, 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 blah. She convinces them. And so they argue about the sleeping arrangements because Hunt's like, there's only 2 rooms in this house. And like, Bryce is like, I'll stay with Ethan. Like, you know, we've been buds for like years. Like, whatever. Bryce is pissed. I mean, Hunt's pissed. Like, what? Like, no, I'm gonna sleep. And Ethan's like bleeding all over her stuff, and she has like white furniture, so she's like, he can just sleep in my bed. The reason that Ethan was even able to get into the apartment is because Ethan knew about this apartment before Danica like died, and so like the wards and stuff he was able to get through, because when Danica bought it like as a surprise for Bryce anyways, he was like in on it, so that's why he was even able to get in. And he, like, Bryce just kind of tells him about like her, because he's like, did you really like do the drop and all that stuff? And she's like, yeah, because they haven't talked apparently since then either. And so she tells him about the drop, like how she saw the pack of devils and Connor and all that. And Ethan says Connor thought you were his mate and asked if she loved him, and she says that she did. And she asks him why he quit Sunball, and he just says it's a stupid game. We go over to Ruhn. Ruhn is at his father's office, and Cormac is there, and Ruhn is like, this engagement is bullshit. And his dad says, like, you and Bryce are going to do what I say and do it willingly. And Cormac says his arrangement is unorthodox and realizes, like, Ruhn doesn't know, basically. And, cause like, well, Cormac's talking about Ruhn's engagement to Hypaxia, and he says that's unorthodox, and Ruhn's like, why? What we learn is that, Hypaxia is like the leader of the witches. Her mom was a witch, but her father was a necromancer, which is actually the House of Flame and Shadow. And she also has necromancy powers, and it's an issue for the witches. Like, they don't really like, which I feel like the witches should be in Flame and Shadow. Like, I think it's weird that they're not,
right?
But whatever. I can see like the Earth ties, but I also see like the Flame and Shadow ties. Like, I don't know. So like the witches are not down with the fact that she's a necromancer. And we learned that her sister was born by a shifter, and her sister is the Hind, and they look nothing alike. So the Hind looks just like Hypaxia's mom. Hypaxia looks like her dad. They have different dads. Hypaxia was also raised like completely separate from the witches. They didn't even see anything about her until like her mom died. And like all of her like education and training were from like Ghost. Her mom like had Ghost that like taught her. Like, it's super weird. So Ruhn says, like, Bryce is with Hunt, and his dad says, well, my spies say that she doesn't bear his scent, so it hasn't been consummated. Like, gross. And Ruhn says, you're doing this because she has more power than you. And Cormac is like, well, I'm lowering myself to be with Bryce. Boy, please. Nobody wants you. So Ruhn asks, like, okay, what did you get out of this? And basically, the Autumn King's like, breeding potential. Like, that's all I care about. And his father says, like, Cormac is the son that I always should have had, basically. Ugh. So we go back over to Hunt. He is getting ready to meet Celestina, which I, like, when I read fantasy books, and I know this is just, like, what they've been, like, written as, like, I never picture black people. Like, I just don't. And so, like, I don't remember this from the first time I read it. So when I was reading, I'm like, oh, like, Hypaxia is black, Celestina is black. Like, I did not catch any of the descriptions. I went on past that. So I love that. So anyway, so she's meeting with Celestina, and like Isaiah is there, Vic is there, like their people are there. And she's basically like, you know, I have your back, like I want to be your friend. And Hunt is like, or no, this is before Hunt even goes back up. So Hunt is getting ready to go meet Celestina. And he's talking to Bryce, and Bryce is like, I have your back, basically. And Hunt's like, what's the plan for Ethan? Like, what's going on? And she's like, he can stay here as long as he wants. I'm not going to turn him over to Sabine. And Hunt is basically like, so Hunt goes to Ethan and is like, like, don't start any crap. Because Ethan was nasty to Bryce. So he's like, why all of a sudden are you cool with her? And he's like, Danica and the pack showed up for her like last spring when like she needed them, and so like why would I hold a grudge and they don't? And Hunt says, you needed permission from your brother to be nice. And Ethan's like, we were friends for 5 years and you've known her for like 5 months. And Hunt's like, you should grow up. And Ethan says Connor loved her for 5 years and only just got her to agree to go on a date with him, like at the last minute, like good luck, bro, basically. So Bryce thinks of Lahaba as she's like leaving them and heading to work, and she just like misses Lahaba. And I love Lily. We miss Lahaba too.
Yeah.
And so Bryce calls Jessica, and Jessica's like, this is the 3rd time this week. Like, what the fuck why do you keep calling me? And she misses Jessica. And Jessica is like, she's worried, basically. She was worried for Bryce when she found out she was starborn, because like most people succumb to like that power, but Bryce hasn't, and neither has Ruhn. And Bryce feels like she can't do anything with the power, but she also is reminded by Jessica, like, you did kill an archangel. I cannot say that. And Jessica tells her, like, you should consider this marriage to Cormac, basically, like, it might be good. So Bryce checks on Hunt, and he's basically like, Celestina's late, and her star starts, like, glowing. She's like, what the heck? And, like, she's like, I gotta get off the phone. She's at work, and Cormac freaking appears. And he says, your star glows because our union is predestined. Please shut up. And she says, exactly what did the Oracle say? And basically the Oracle told him like he was destined to unite with a princess who possessed a star in her heart, and their union would help their people. And it's weird for her to Cormac to have a job, because in Avalon, like, it's old country, like females have no rights. They are only like the support of their husbands or brothers or whoever. It's super old timey. There's no TV, there's no internet. Like, who is choosing to live that way? I would not want to be there. And Bryce is like, I do not want to be there. Like, can you imagine Bryce living there? And so she's like, how much do I have to pay you to get you to leave me alone? He's like, I have money. I'm a prince. Like, I'm good. And he says, like, once we have our heirs, like, you can take whatever lover you want. And she's like, absolutely not. So Hunt meets with Celestina and learns, like, she's really pleasant. And she's like, can you guys sit down, please? And he's like, please. And he's like, I don't trust this lady. Like, what's up? And she says that she wants to earn their trust, and she considers them to be partners like she did with her other unit. She says she wants to know what happened between Hunt and Micah, to learn, like, what went wrong, basically. And he says, well, he tried to kill Mai and, like, doesn't finish it. And she says she's sorry. She tells them that she doesn't want them to have to live in the barracks. Okay, so then Celestina tells Isaiah that she doesn't want to have slaves, and she considers him to be a freed man, and she will work on convincing the Asteri to free him. And she tells them all, like, we're going to meet tomorrow at 9. Like, there's no reason to get up early. You guys should get your rest. And she wants the others to get rest. And they're like, the others? And she says they're coming from the north, and you guys should have, like, received an official letter. And they're like, we didn't get no letter, lady. And she's basically like, so they had to split up Sandriel's Triari, and 2 people walk in the room. And it is Pollux, aka the Hammer, and Baxian, the Hellhound.
Of course.
And Hunt immediately jumps on Pollux. He is like attacking this man. So back to Ethan. He's like at home by himself at Bryce's, cleaning his wounds. He feels like a lone wolf. Like, he's looking at himself in the mirror. He shifts into the wolf form, but he like feels ashamed. He can't even stand to look at himself as a wolf. So he shifts back. And Perry texts him like, please tell me you're alive. This is where my note was about the Omegas. The scapegoat and the target of the pack. And I was like, that was so interesting to me. But anyway, so he's moping at home. So Bryce goes to see Hunt because she gets a call from Celestina that her man's is locked up. And he's all beat up. Pollux is all beat up. Celestina called her. Isaiah put him in the cell to like separate them. And Hunt's like, I want you to leave. Don't come see me here. Like, get out, Bryce. And Baxian comes in like after Bryce. And Pollux tells Bryce like, come closer, basically. And like, he's calling her like all kinds of like sex worker, like shitty stuff because he sucks. He's a misogynist. And Pollux goes like, I thought your kind worked the night shift. And she says, sex work is actually respected here in Lunathian. Like, that's not a jab at me. And Pollux says, Micah should have killed you. And so she, like, leans into his cell, like, close enough that he can touch her. And she says that she's going to make his life a living hell if he touches Hunt again. And Pollux, like, grabs for her. So she, like, blinds him with her light really fast. And Baxian says he's glad someone put a bullet in Micah's head, which is weird. And then Celestina comes over the intercom and says, like, Hunt's good to go. And Pollux is like, what about me? Nobody cares about you. Back to Therian, he is hacking into Sophie's email. He loves being a mayor. He doesn't want to lose his mayor form, but he hates to be under the water. So he, like, lives in a building that the, like, ocean or, like, the River Queen owns. And, like, basically the mayor have to get into the water every 24 hours or, like, they'll be permanently stuck in their human form. So he's, like, going through these emails. He sees emails she sent 3 years ago. It's weird. And, like, he sees these different subjects like Dust Truth and Project Thur. And something about the Six will kill them for it. And he assumes that's about the Asteri. And then he sees a draft of her writing about finding her brother. And he finds this other email that he figures out is Danica. I can't remember what it is. I think I wrote it later. But it's
like Banshee Lover.
Banshee Lover, like yeah. And he's like, that must be Danica. But he is, like, running because he literally has 2 seconds. He does this all the damn time. He is, like, literally running to get into the water. So, like, they have, like, some, like, water access from this building. And he has to, like, submerge. And he, like, stays in there for, like, 10 minutes to make sure he's good or whatever so that it counts. And then he, like, goes back to looking at the emails. And he's wondering if, like, Danica knew Emil before she died. And he gets a report about a boat found on the coast with an adolescent life jacket and the scent of a young male. So he's like, this must be Emil. And he wonders where he's, like, hiding at. So he goes to, like, check out this boat and he finds a human blood and, like, an arm left behind. And he knows, like, Ophian must have sent a unit here for the boy and wonders, like, why does Ophian want him? And on the boat, he finds a map marked with, like, the marshes where this boat is and also circled as Crescent City. So he notifies his team to get on it. So Bryce and Hunt go get ice cream. Hunt is, like, suffering because he's watching Bryce, like, lick this ice cream. She got pistachio ice cream. He got coffee. Fair. And he offers to, like, fix her, like, moped because it's broken or something. So she's like, she wrote it there, but she's like, it sounds weird. And we learned that, like, because of his lightning power, Sandriel used to have him fix stuff all the time, but, like, not for good reasons, to, like, basically make it malfunction during the war and, like, kill people. And she tells Hunt that Naomi and Celestina are worried about him and, like, tells him, like, you cannot, like, do that with Pollux again. Like, you have to, like, chill or whatever. And so they're in a park and, like, the gates are announcing that it's closing. So basically, since Bryce used the gates, like, back in the spring to, like, make announcements, they use them for announcements all the time. Like, wow, what a bright idea. So she is, like, begging Hunt, like, please don't give the governor any reason to punish you. And, like, she just remembers his wings getting cut off and she's like, I can't stand to, like, watch that again. So as they leave, they pass by a Reaper. And Reapers are basically people who were dying and, like, basically begged the Underking to, like, not die. And so they're basically, like, they are the undead and they are, like, permanently alive. Like, they can't be killed. They are, like, in their, like, youth form, but they start to look creepy and they don't, like, eat, sleep, breathe. They don't do anything but, like, kill. Like, they have no purpose in life. So Therian, like, pulls up on the river, like, frantically waving at them, and they haven't seen him all summer. And he tells, like, Bryce, like, we need to talk. And he still calls her Legs. So they go to Bryce's apartment, and she tells Ruhn to come meet them there. And he asks her, like, if Danica had ever mentioned a Sophie. And she is like, I'm not going to tell you anything. Like, give me more info. So Therian says Sophie was a rebel caught last week, and her brother are Thunderbirds. And Hunt says, like, the Asteri hunted them to extinction, like, because of their power. And Therian says, like, Sophie made it, or someone took her body, and the River Queen wants Sophie and her brother. And Therian says he found emails with Danica looking for a safe place for Sophie or her brother if she needed it. And they don't believe, like, this whole thing about Danica. Like, why would Danica talk to rebels and, like, not turn them in? And Bryce says Emil is a kid who was in a death camp. And, like she's like, do you even care about the fact that he's a kid? Like, it's outside of, like, powers and, like, all this other stuff. And Therian goes to leave and says, and she says Danica wasn't a rebel and she didn't know Sophie. And he tells her, like, the email was, like, Banshee fan, whatever. Like, and he knows, like, Danica loved that band and yada, yada, yada. So Bryce thinks, like, of what Philip Briggs said in the first book about Danica and about how, like, she was a sympathizer and all this stuff and, like, thinking about these emails. And he tells her, like, does Dust Truth or Project Thur ring a bell? And it doesn't. And she just is realizing, like, she still doesn't know shit about Danica. And Bryce wants to be involved, of course, because as soon as you mention Danica, like, here comes Bryce. And Hunt says, like, Bryce, we have to stay low. The Asteri will kill us and your family and, like, everyone you care about. And then Ruhn busts in. And Ruhn, like, makes a point that, like, Danica probably was involved, which is hard for Bryce to hear. And Bryce says, like, she won't let the River Queen use email. And Therian says, like, don't get in my way, basically. So Hunt and Ruhn say, like, they've never heard, or they haven't heard of Ophium being in the area, because obviously, like, they work the two police forces, the 33rd and the Ox. So, like, we haven't heard about Ophium being in the area. But Therian is like, I literally saw the boat. Like, I know what I saw. And he says, like, he's looking for a place, or the email basically said that the place that they could hide, it was like listed or like written as like a place where weary souls can find a place free of suffering, basically. And Bryce says, like, she'll ask Fury what she knows. And Therian gives her the emails. And then Ruhn, what am I saying? Hunt and Ruhn say getting involved is a bad idea. But Ethan wants to help the kid. Like, so we got the idiots, Bryce and Ethan. And then we've got Hunt and Ruhn, like, don't do it. So Bryce and Hunt argue a little bit, and he says, like, you just want to do this because you want to learn about Danica, that's fact. And Bryce reads the emails between Sophie and Emil, because those emails were in there too, and basically thinks about how everyone just wants to find this kid to use him, but she actually wants to help him. So Hunt is pissed at Therian for even, like, bringing this to Bryce, because he knows she has no self-control. So that night, her and the boys, like, all get pizza. And Ruhn says, like, he can mind speak. So he speaks to her and is basically like, Sabine is going to take offense of you keeping Ethan. And she's like, or he tells her, like, maybe Ethan can come live with us. And Ruhn says, like, he was a jerk to you for years. And she was like, well, I was also, like, not good to him either. So Flynn and Declan come over, and basically they had stolen Ruhn's key and, like, made copies of her key. Like, they are so, like, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Like, I cannot. And they tell her that the reason, like, Cormac basically hates them. So the reason that Ruhn had his ordeal is because, like, for whatever reason, they got sent to Avalon. And so I think it was Flynn. Flynn was basically like, oh no, it was Declan. Declan was over there like, Ruhn could get the Star Sword. Like, why haven't you gotten the Star Sword? And like, basically it's like all the Valbaran Fae are better than the Avalon Fae. And was like, Cormac, like, why haven't you got the sword in all these years? So his dad, King Morven, was like, basically all of y'all can go into the caves and like figure this out. So it was Ruhn, Flynn, and Declan, and then Cormac and he has twin cousins basically. So they all, like, went in there, and they were trying to kill each other, but, like, the caves are, like, haunted. Like, there's, like, spooky, eerie stuff that goes on there. So then they were just, like, trying to stay alive. So obviously, like, Ruhn comes out. He's got the sword. There was, like, a sarcophagus. He, like, pulled the sword. It was literally, like, Excalibur with the sword. And so King Morven was pissed, obviously. And so, like, Declan, because they're idiots, he's like, what are the sleeping arrangements around here? And Hunt says, I'm bunking with Bryce. Like, he's like, not one more night is going by, because I also, like, she slept with she slept with Ethan the night before. There's so many names in this damn book. And, like, Bryce, like, Bryce doesn't care about being naked or nothing like that. So she literally had on, like, this, like, flimsy little t-shirt, no underwear or anything. And, like, Hunt's like, what is going on here? So Hunt's like, yeah, I'm sleeping with you tonight. And so Ethan is like, good, she snores. So Bryce is like laying in bed that night. She cannot sleep with Hunt like laying next to her. Obviously, again, they haven't like consummated their relationship. So like it's very like tension build. But Ember calls, and Ember is like, I knew. She knows about the engagement. Like she's like, I knew you sent me home for a reason. And like so Bryce is like on the phone with her mom. She's literally walking around in a t-shirt and a thong. And like Hunt's like, Ethan is here. Like, but obviously Ethan's probably used to this, so like it doesn't matter. So Bryce asks like, what's up, Mom? Like, did you get home okay? And she's like, yeah, we had plenty of time to get settled and get all the phone calls asking when the wedding is. And she's like, oh, you and Randall are renewing your vows? And her mom is like, is this a scheme to get Hunt to profess his love for you? And she's talking to her mom on speakerphone. So she's like, oh, Mom, like, no. She says, Mom, I'm not marrying Cormac. And she says, well, there's pictures of him at your office yesterday, which she had not told Hunt that he came to the office. So Hunt's like, And Bryce tells her mom, like, I'm an adult and you have no say in, like, what I will or will not do. And she's like, you have no idea what I've been through recently, so just drop it. And her mom says, well, we're at your disposal, like, princess, basically. And she's like, if you need us, your highness. And she hangs up. So Bryce goes to meet with Juniper and Fury, and Juniper, like, did not get the principal lead. And it's basically because, like, they tell Juniper it's because she doesn't fit the costume, which, like, yeah, whatever. It's really because in the, like, the shelters in the spring, like, when that all happened, Juniper was, like, the only person, like, fighting for the humans and, like, wanting them to help and stuff. So she's basically getting punished for defending the people. And we learn, like, there's smaller dance companies that want Juniper, but obviously, like, she wants the big one. Like, she's earned it. Like, she should have it. So she's like, I'm going to hold out for another year and, like, see if I get it next year or whatever. So Juniper leaves for class, and Bryce takes his time to ask Fury about Danica. And Fury says she didn't know anything, but she does believe, like, everything that they say. And Fury says the only other secret I knew about Danica is that she was a bloodhound, which Bryce did not know. And what we learn is that bloodhounds can scent familial ties. So that is why, like, Danica knew very early that, or like as soon as Bryce and Ruhn were in the same vicinity, she knew that they were related and not just like cousins like Bryce used to tell everybody. She can basically scent that out. And like Fury says that Danica didn't tell anyone because it's dangerous to be a bloodhound. Like if someone's like political or like, especially like if they're like a prince or princess and like their lineage is being questioned, like they can basically figure that out. So Fury says that the gift comes from her father's line, and Bryce is like, I don't even know who her dad is, and doesn't know if Danica knew who her dad was, and says like it was just one of Danica's many powers. And Bryce asks like, why did she never tell me that? Or why didn't you ever tell me that? Asking Fury, and she's like, I mean, it wasn't really relevant. And so Bryce is like, it just feels like Danica was always 10 feet ahead of me. And Fury says like, Bryce, she's dead. Like, it doesn't matter. Like now, like none of that even matters. And Fury asks Bryce like, well, what are you going to do if you find out the truth? And she says, I'm going to pray that I can accept it. So Hunt goes to work with his new friends, and Baxine is basically like, is this all you do? Like, why don't you do more at like your job? And Hunt's like, I want a normal life. And Baxine says like, the male that gave me this scar, because he has a scar from Hunt's lightning, he says like, that male would be ashamed of like what you are now, and says like, basically like, even though Baxine is not a slave, he says he did not serve Sandriel freely. And Hunt says like, I don't care. Like, I never asked you why you work for Sandriel. And Baxter's just like, you do that with everyone. He's like, basically, like, you only see surface level with everyone. And so the governor, like, texts them all, and basically she's making them partner up. So Celestina says, like, unfortunately for Naomi, she is partnered with Pollux, and then Hunt is partnered with Baxian, and she wants them to, like, acclimate them to the city, like, not just the 33rd, but, like, their way of life, and, like, kumbaya. That's not real, but okay. And Baxian says Pollux is probably upset about being separated from the Hind, because we learned that Pollux and the Hind are a couple. And like more than that, Pollux likes control over his belongings and considers Lydia, so the Hind's real name is Lydia, his belongings. And Lydia and the Harpy, so the Hind and the Harpy are actually back up north with Ephraim. And Hunt asks like Baxian, like, are you and the Harpy a thing? Which like the Harpy is not supposed to be like cute or anything, so like it's kind of like like I don't know. And Baxian asks Hunt, like, why do you keep working here if, like, you're free? And he's like, I need money. And he's like, oh, like, I'm sure Bryce is an expensive girlfriend, like a princess and all. And Hunt says, first rule, don't fucking talk to me unless I talk to you. So Therian goes to Bryce's apartment, and Ethan checks to, like, make sure that he's supposed to be there, because he's like, I got a text, like, I told Bryce I was coming. And Ethan, like, looks at the messages and then checks the number under Bryce's name, which is Legs, to make sure this is Bryce's number. He's not playing no games. And, like, okay, so Therian is very flirty, so, like, they're going back and forth about, like, him drooling on her underwear, and, like, Ethan's like, are you guys a thing? And he's like, no, like, we just have, like, a relationship. So Therian, like, he remembers, like, watching Ethan. Like, Ethan was a huge Sunball player. He, like, remembers it, and he knows that Ethan has a thing for Bryce, even though it's never been said. And Therian asks, like, did you know anything about Danica? And Ethan says no. Ethan says Danica was a history major, and so one time she did tell me she was researching something dangerous, but then she said she stopped because it was dangerous, which doesn't really seem like Danica to, like, just give up on something. So while this is all going on, Ruhn is meeting with Bryce at the Fae Archives, and she wants him to be back up to meet Therian and wants to ask about Danica being a bloodhound. And Ruhn really wants her to just stay out of this business with, like, Emil. He tells her, like, before the drop you were normal, but, like, now you have a political involvement, and being involved will get noticed. And so they get to her apartment, and Bryce freezes because Ethan is, like, sitting on the couch petting this cat, and is like, your cat is a sweetheart. And she's like, that is not a cat. And the cat starts speaking, and everyone, like, runs, and it's Adis. And he says, why don't you know how to use your powers yet? It's not just for party tricks. And she says, what powers? And he says, I remember Thea and her powers, and you have them, so I assume you have her other powers. And Adis tells Ruhn that he knew Thea and the sniveling prince that Ruhn gets his power from, which is Peleus. So what we learned is that Peleus was actually, like, Thea's, like, general, but he killed Thea. And this is what Adis is saying. This is not what their history says. Peleus supposedly killed Thea and stole her sword and then married himself to her daughter, Helena, and that he was an imposter and that her other daughter got away. And Helena had like that raven black hair with star power and also the ability to do shadows, like just like Ruhn. And they asked like, okay, well, why didn't you help and all that? And he was like, I arrived too late. And he said, but I asked my brother to face off with Peleus, who was Apollyon, and he did, I think it was Apollyon. He did kill Peleus. He also is the one who killed one of the Asteri. And Adis says, like, this is the same fight. We just, like, keep fighting. And Hunt says, well, hell is our enemy. And Adis says the Asteri changed the history and tells Bryce, like, basically she should look in Jessica's library for the true history. And Adis says, like, where did everyone come from before this world? He says, Adis is basically saying, like, you know, we're here to help. And Hunt's like, yeah, well, like, what about the demons and stuff that came in the spring? And he's like, well, those are our pets. And when Micah opened the, like, gates, he opened their cages. So, like, my bad, basically. But he's like, hell is at Bryce's command. And Adis says that he was in the alley this morning when she was talking to Fury. And he admits, like, I don't know anything about Sophie and Danica either. And Bryce says that she doesn't know any rebels. And because he's basically like, you should talk to a rebel. And she's like, I don't know any rebels. And he says, really? Because there's one right behind you. And they turn around and he says, hello, Agent Silverbow, and disappears. And we learn that Agent Silverbow is Cormac. Oh, Mr. High and Mighty. Ruhn says, do our fathers know? And he says, no, of course not. And Cormac asks Therion, like, what do you know about Sophie? And Therion doesn't answer. And Therion says, like, I guess she's your girlfriend. And Cormac kind of, like, stiffens. So, like, yeah, like, he's Agent Silverbow. He loves Sophie. Like, they were a thing. Cormac asks, like, he's like, I'm going to ask again, like, how do you know Sophie? And Therion says, I was sent to confirm her death, but, like, doesn't answer anymore. And Cormac says Adis left a hole in the wards to get in. Like, that's basically how he got into Bryce's apartment. And Cormac says, like, he came here because he knew that they were looking for Emil, and Emil fled Pippa. And he basically says, like, he had promised Sophie to look after Emil, and he feels like he failed her. And he says, like, Pippa has no line that she won't cross. Like, she wants to use Emil as a weapon. And Cormac assures them that he's changed since the whole ordeal with Ruhn, and, like, he doesn't want to kill anybody. And Bryce tells Cormac that Therion wants Emil for the River Queen. And Therion tells him, like, her body was gone and her shackles were unlocked. And Cormac, like, basically is like, oh, maybe there's hope that she's alive. And Cormac asks about Danica and says, like, basically that's why he agreed to marry Bryce, because he, like, needed a reason to come to Lunathian to search for Emil and have access to Ruhn, because he knows that he can mind speak. And basically we find out that the mind speaking was also how they all survived in the caves. And basically Ophion wants Ruhn for his mind speaking abilities. Ruhn's like, I am not working for fucking Ophion. And Hunt's like, yeah, me either. And Cormac basically says, like, he's going to blackmail him and, like, tell his dad that he can mind speak if he doesn't help them. So Cormac says that, you know, I thought you guys would want to help because you're really sympathetic to the humans. And he says that 3 years ago, Danica wanted Sophie to go into the Asteri's palace to get info, but she died before Sophie could get it. But Sophie did end up getting it, and she was basically using that, like, as leverage with Ophion to help her get her brother. So that's what Ophion and Pippa want from Sophie. So Ruhn, like, looks at Bryce and, like, knows, like, she's already invested and ready to do all this. And Bryce says, Ada set it up so that you'd be here right at the same time, and asks, like, what do you know of, like, my powers? And Ruhn says, like, Cormac will know anything because he, like, researched everything about the star powers. Bryce says, like, I want out of this marriage. And she's like, but if I get rid of you, like, my dad will just replace you with somebody else. So let's just use it as a cover for now. And Hunt and Ruhn are like, you know, we're going to think over everything you told us, Cormac. Like, we'll get back to you. And Cormac's like, I want a blood oath. Like, you're not going to tell anybody. And they're like, I'm not doing no damn blood oath with you. Like, go take that old timey stuff on somewhere. And so Cormac's like, well, I'm going to go out in this bar. Like, if you're ready, like, come and find me. So Bryce is like, it's like the middle of the day, by the way. Like, Bryce is like, I have to go back to work. So Ethan is like, I'm sorry, can we back all the way up to the fact that the cat was, like, a prince of hell? And everyone else is, like, moved way on from that. So they all agree, like, not to speak about this to anyone, which we know is a lie because Ruhn cannot not tell Declan and Flynn everything. So he will end up telling them. But Ruhn and Therion consider, like, going to the bone quarter to look for Emil, but, like, aren't really sure that that would be a place he would want to be. And Hunt, like, wants Bryce to carry a gun with her, but Bryce has, like, on this super tight, like, dress. So he's like, well, take the sword then, which is Danica's sword. And Hunt has only, like, been, like, free for a few months, and he's like, great, like, we're about to go back into war again. Like, I can't get out. And he's scared. Like, Hunt is tired of this life. Like, he's like, it's not worth it anymore. Like, it's not worth it. But Bryce wants to find Emil, and she wants to know what Sophie knew. And Bryce tells Hunt, like, I don't want to wait until winter solstice, and she kisses him. And Hunt is like, I'm kicking that wolf out of our apartment as soon as possible so that we can be alone. And, like, they're in an alley, and, like, they're, like, starting to hook up, but then, like, Hunt's like, oh, like, no, like, you're engaged. And he's like, we have to, like, keep your cover good. Like, we can't mess that up. But she does, like, check with her and ask, like, you know, do you really want this now? And it's not, like, just your emotion, which she does. So Therian tells Ethan how Micah and Sandriel died because Ethan doesn't know that either. And Ethan is hurt that, like, Sabine and Bryce, like, didn't tell him who killed Connor, which, like, honestly, it probably just was a lot going on. Well, I don't know about Sabine, but, like, Bryce, like, is a little busy. I don't know. And so Ethan feels guilty for shaming Bryce, and, like, basically he was like, you don't care about this and all this stuff, when, like, obviously she did. And so he goes to her room and he sees Danica's sword, and he thinks how much the sword, like, meant to the wolves. And so he is like ninjing all around her apartment with the sword. He's like wielding, like, whoosh, 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 like, doing all this. And why would you get your big behind on this table? I know this boy is huge. I know he is. So he jumps on the coffee table, and of course, okay, have you ever seen that YouTube video called Scarlet Takes a Tumble?
Oh, I don't know.
It's so funny. It's this girl, and she is bigger, and she was, like, in her, like, room or living room, I don't know. She's, like, dancing, and she's like, ah, and she, like, stands on the coffee table, and it, like, flips over, and she, like, it's so old, but that's exactly what I imagine. So he is, like, on this table, and, like, he's, like, wielding, and Bryce, like, I forgot something, and as she comes in, the table collapses. And so there's, like, all of these papers that must have been, like, hidden in the table that come out, and she says the table was there when she moved in, so these are obviously Danica's papers. So we go back to Ruhn, and he is meeting with Flynn and Declan, and, like, he tells them everything, like I said, and he's like, I'm gonna go meet with Cormac. So Bryce is going through the papers with Ethan, and it's basically, like, a whole bunch of articles. Some of it's on the origin of the world, some of it is on weapons, and Ethan says that he and Connor did know that Danica was a bloodhound. And what we learn is that the Asteri basically claim to be stars from heaven because they possess a literal star inside of them. But Danica challenged that fact because no one has ever truly seen that to be true. And she believed that they might not actually be stars. And if they are stars, they must be fallen stars. And she sees a page and it says Dust Truth on it, but the page is blank. So Ruhn goes and meets with Cormac at this bar, and Cormac talks about basically, like, how lazy Ruhn is and, like, how he just, like, is a party boy and all this stuff. And Cormac says that Sophie was in contact with the most powerful of their agents, known as Agent Daybright. And, like, basically when Sophie got captured, they assumed, like, that their old methods of communication might have got hacked. So they want Ruhn to take her place because he can mind speak. And so basically he tells them, like, they'll talk on, like, this, like, it's like a psychic bridge. Like, I don't know. I see, like, the reading rainbow in my brain. I don't know. So basically Daybright has a really good connection and intel on this theory and has saved them from multiple attacks. So, like, they need to keep this communication open. So Ruhn asks, like, why would I trust you? And Cormac says, like, because I just told you super dangerous information. And Cormac says, like, you know, here's this crystal. This is how you can start your communication with her. Daybright has another one. And, like, they communicate kind of like they do with the gates. So Cormac gets kind of teary-eyed talking about Sophie, and he wants to find her, and he does admit that he loves her. And Ruhn says she might be hiding in the Bone Quarter, and says, like, you should marry Sophie, not just, like, Bryce, because you're betrothed to her. And he thinks about how, like, uninterested Hypaxia has seemed to be in him. And he goes and, like, tries this thing with, and then Cormac basically says that Daybright has told them that the Asteri are working on mech suits, which are suits that, like, the humans, there's different versions, but basically you get inside of it and it's like the Iron Man suit. I mean, that's basically what I imagine. Mm-hmm. And so, like, the Asteri are working on mech suits for the Vanir, so they'll be, like, even more powerful, even though they're already more powerful than the humans. So Therian is working on fixing his, like, ship or whatever, and his fiance then comes up. She doesn't even ever get a name, or does she? I don't think they ever give her a name. So. Yeah, and also the River Queen's black, I think. Like, I was looking at, like, fanfics. I was like, oh, okay. So she comes to see him, and he, like, is avoiding her, and she's like, you know, let's hook up. Like, you're my fiance. It's only been 10 years. And he's like, like, maybe tomorrow. Like, girl, the man don't want you.
Take a hint.
Literally, free him of these shackles. And she's like, why are you always going to the city? And like, who are your friends? And he tells her like, he basically tells her like she can come meet them, knowing good and well that she's never going to be able to. And he's like, oh, like maybe you can come and meet them and like we can go on a double date. And she's like, what's a double date? And basically like under the water, is it basically like just like Avalon, like they have no internet, obviously, because it's wet down there. But I don't know. I thought maybe it'd be like Atlantis or something. Like I was like,
that's what I was.
But no, they're just like in the water down there. So like they have no internet, no computers. Like she has no idea. She doesn't know what a double date is. So like he tells her, and he knows like he's like always above water because he knows as soon as like he gets like actually forced to marry her that he'll be stuck below and like never allowed to come up. So he's like using this mission as an escape. And we go back to Hunt. He is giving Baxian like a tour of the Comedian. And he kind of feels bad because I don't like every other city in this world except for Lunathian is like the ancient times. Like Baxian doesn't even know what video games are. So he's like, I'll show you like tomorrow, basically. And Hunt wants to tell Isaiah what's going on. Like he likes Isaiah, but he's like, I just can't trust him. And like, good call, Hunt. So Bryce updates Hunt on what she found in the table that night and they're in bed. And he tells her like, look, I am scared, but he's like, I'm in, like, I'll help you. And so she, like, wants to hook up with him, but he's nervous because Ethan can obviously hear them. And she's like, we'll be quiet. And he's like, it's been a long time. And she's like, oh, like, how long? And he's like, 6 months. So, like, they talk about each other's last time, and they do, like, hook up, but really she just, like, gives him a blowjob. And so, like, they do this whole thing, and, like, afterwards, Ethan yells, please, have sex louder! I didn't hear everything that time. And, like, Hunt, like, turns to Bryce and says, I'm gonna fuck you senseless. And Ethan says, that sounds medically dangerous!
I really like Ethan.
It's hilarious. Like, please, have it louder! I couldn't hear all the details. Oh my god. I could not live in this world where you can hear and smell everything. Like,
oh my gosh, no.
Like, embarrassment at all time high. I could not. So they go to sleep, but Hunt like wakes up in this weird dream state and he is like stuck to a chair. And the Prince of the Pit, Apollyon, is like, why don't you free yourself? And calls him Orion. Like all of the like old creepy people always call Hunt by his real name, which is Orion. And Apollyon tells them, like, we're in a pocket realm, like, between the realms, and, like, this is not a dream. He says, I have no idea what you are and what you and the Starborn girl can do. You need to train your powers. You guys are conduits. He says that I smell war and the Northern Rift is growing, but Hunt's like, I'm not interested in the Northern Rift. And he wakes up and Bryce is, like, still asleep next to him. So Ruhn, Flynn, and Declan are plotting, and they're trying to figure out, like, what's Ruhn's going to do to, like, he's going to reach out to Daybright for the first time. So he, like, goes onto his mental bridge, and he's, like, trying to think of an agent name, and a female responds, which shocks him because he wasn't expecting a female, and she just like appears as like pure flame, which is like a cloaking device for her. And she gives him like the code and to confirm that she's Daybright, and she's like, okay, we'll call you like Agent Knight, basically. And she's like, yeah, I can tell you're new. They must have been desperate. And she says, Agent Silverbow, oh, no, she says, tell Agent Silverbow I prefer this communication method, and then she just, like, leaves. So he asks Cormac, like, okay, why didn't you tell me she was a female? And Cormac's just like, don't reach out to her again until I tell you, like, we need to, and he's like, I need to track down a Reaper. So we go to Hunt and Isaiah, and they're called into a meeting at Celestina's house, and she looks upset, and Pollux and Baxian both look like they've been in a fight. So basically, Pollux was at a bar being a misogynist, being disgusting, being a rapist, and a girl, like, he's like, oh, she wanted it, and Baxian's like, no, she did not. And basically, like, Pollux is like, you always want my scraps. And Baxian says, she literally told you no 10 times. And Baxian says, well, some girls say no when they mean yes. No, they don't. No means no. No is a full sentence. And so basically, even though, like, Pollux is right, but everyone's like, okay, Pollux, you've been watching, Sandra, or, what are your names? Everyone is like, Baxian, I get it, but like you also have watched Pollux be disgusting for like hundreds of years. So like what was different this time? And he basically like just like has had it. So Celestina says like, well, the issue is that the fight was filmed and it's on the news. And she's like, I did offer the girl the option to press charges, and she was like, she refused, but it's probably because like she's afraid for her life and her family. And she's like, I don't want this going on in this city anymore. And she says, well, the Asteri want me to give Pollux a second chance. And Baxian is like, what about me? And she's like, I'm going to give you a second chance. And they're like, okay, well, what do we do to fix it? And she says, it's already done. She says, we've been given a gift. And the gift is that she has been forced to marry Ephraim. So they're punishing her. And they basically are going to have their mating ritual at the autumnal equinox in a month, which is basically like Halloween. Super creepy. Love it. And then after that, like her and Ephraim will go back and forth from their cities and basically until they have an offspring. And Hunt can tell, like, she's upset. Like, he knows she's being punished. And she dismisses everyone, but she does want to speak to Hunt. And he assumes, like, great, like, I'm in trouble. Like, I didn't keep Baxian on a leash. And she just wants to know, like, about Bryce and Cormac's engagement and, like, how he feels about it. And she says, like, you know, Hunt, you are exactly who I thought you would be. And she tells him that she was secretly friends with Shahar. And she regrets not helping in their fight. But she is glad that he killed Sandriel. It's something that she wanted to do. And she admits that she actually tried to purchase Hunt 3 times and free him, but she had to stop because it would like look suspicious if she asked anymore. And he wonders, like, would Celestina be on their side? And she says, like, you know, she wants them to be friends. And he apologizes for not stopping Baxian last night, but she says that's not your responsibility. He says that Sandriel's Triari is toxic and she needs to like watch them basically. We go over to Therian. He has Ethan with him and they are at a body that was discovered. And Therian asks, like, do you smell anything? And Ethan can pick up a human scent. And Therian asks, like, why don't you switch to your wolf form? Like, it would be so much easier. But we know, like, Ethan won't because he's, like, ashamed of himself. So Therian takes Ethan below, which is, like, super weird. And he basically tells him, like, he believes that the dead female must have helped Emil and, like, had his scent on him. And, like, so somebody, like, tracked her down, basically. And Ethan wants to help with the search for Emil, but Therian doesn't want him to and threatens to, like, trap him below just to keep him safe. I do not want to be under the water. I would not go down there, ever. Nope. But Therian gets called to the River Queen and, like, he knows, like, she must be pissed off because it's, like, storming. And so apparently she controls the weather. So Bryce and Ruhn are walking to the Ox Training Center because she needs to do her training. And she gets a postcard from her mom. And we learned, like, when they would get into fights, that's how they communicated, was, like, passing postcards back and forth. And Ruhn says, like, he wished he would have had Ember as a stepmom. And she says, you're, like, 20 years older than her. He's like, so, like, whatever. And so Bryce plans to go home with Hunt for winter solstice and, like, tells Ruhn he should come. And he asks, like, why won't you take the Star Sword? And she says, it's yours. And she's like, I have Danica's, like, I don't want it. And he tells her, like, the sword is yours. And she says, no, I like that you're the chosen one. And, like, you don't know how special you are, Ruhn. And she says, the sword came to you for a reason. Like, there might be a knife out there for me. That trigger anything? Mm-hmm. And she asks, like, if he thinks what happened to, or if he thinks about what happened to, like, the worlds that the Fae and everybody originally came from. And she closes her eyes, and when she reopens them, Ruhn is literally being dragged by a Reaper down into the sewer. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, I was like, jump scare.
I know. So Ruhn wakes, like, up confused. He doesn't know what's going on. And Daybright is speaking to him and is like, wake up, Ruhn. Like, you need to wake up. Something's off. And she says, like, I felt like something bad was going to happen, so I reached out to you. And she's like, if you don't get up, something bad's going to happen. And he, like, can smell her scent. And he's like, it's so familiar. And she's like, you do not know me. Like, we've never met. You need to wake up. So we go over to Bryce. Ruhn's still out of it. And the Reaper tells Bryce that they have a message for her and, like, not to come any closer or they're going to, like, drown Ruhn. And they say that the Prince of the Pit sent us. And they say Apollyon is ready to fight and wants to fight you at your full power. And she says, well, I was literally on my way to training. Like, thank you. And they say, like, you know, they say that Apollyon is hunting in the Bone Quarter for another that he may fight, basically hinting to Emil. And they say that, you know, you sold your soul and when you die, we will rip you to shreds. But they attacked her anyways and she, like, blasts them with power. And then Cormac comes out of nowhere and he can teleport. So he starts transporting, like, Ruhn and then Hunt out of the sewer. And she also, like, while he's getting Ruhn out, he throws her Ruhn's sword and she fights the Reapers and she injures one of them, which is crazy because the Reapers are supposed to be unkillable. So we go to part 2, which is the Abyss. And Therian is at the River Queen, like, talking to the River Queen, and she says, you asked my daughter on a date above. She is too fragile for that. And I'm like, this lady keeps this daughter under lock and key. Like, oh my, even if she was, like, even if he did like her, like, I would not want anything to do with this. And basically the River Queen wants him to keep looking for Emil and then punish him. She makes him pick trash. And so, like, oh my God, poor Therian. Ruhn goes to see his father and basically we learned that, like, Cormac, after he, like, saved them, like, he disappeared and, like, went to go check on something. And so he goes to see his dad and Ruhn's, like, basically like, what's the lore behind the sword? Because when Bryce was using it, it, like, lit up, like, it kind of, like, lighted with power. And then also she was able to hurt the Reaper. And he tells him about the Reaper and his dad basically says, like, it's an ancient sword. It's from another world made from a fallen star. And his dad said he's been waiting days for Bryce to come over here and say something about the engagement, and she hasn't. And he wants Bryce with Cormac to make sure that their power stays with the Fae. So basically, he doesn't want her to mate or like breed with Hunt, basically. So Bryce and Hunt are at the dock and they're meeting Cormac, and she wants to know how to teleport because that's pretty cool. And he said like it's kind of like folding pieces of paper together, and like you picture where you want to go, and like like you connect the dots basically like that way. And he tells her it's a starborn power, and so that's kind of why Cormac thought he would be the starborn prince, because he developed the power. So they agree to start training tomorrow, and Hunt wants to use Declan to find Emil. So Bryce calls Jessica to ask for payment to get into the bone quarter, because you have to use Deathmark to get over there. Like it sends a special boat basically. And she tells her like she'll send them to her. It'll get there by tomorrow. And Jessica says like, you know, you're not going to find Danica over there. And she says something to Bryce about like, don't you want to know why Danica was always like in the shop? Like she wasn't just there hanging out with you. So Cormac wants to go too, but there's only going to be 2 Deathmarks. So there's not enough for him. So they reach out to Declan, and Declan basically compiles a bunch of footage from their attack from the Reapers at the sewer, and also of Danica in the gallery, since Jessica said something. And Bryce tells Ruhn that she doesn't know how much she can take about like Danica's secrets. Like I would have been done with Danica in the first book, but yeah, that's just me. Like I do not like, most people don't like Danica. Like that's just it. And so Bryce thinks that Danica was probably doing research in Jessica's library and like knew what the library really was. So they find the Reaper attack, but it seems like the Reaper knew where the cameras were to avoid, kind of like Micah did. And Ruhn basically paid Jessica for those death marks for Bryce and Hunt to go to the bone quarter, but she's like doing some research on the Reapers, because like the Reapers are supposed to like, they're in House of Flame and Shadow. So like the Under King in the Bone Quarter is like the head of the House of Flame and Shadow. So she wanted like evidence before she just like went over there and started questioning the man. Yeah, like sending people after her. So Bryce is like, okay, like I'm gonna go to the gym, but Hunt's like, okay, obviously she can't go to the gym by herself. So Hunt comes out after her, and she says, we're not really going to the gym. We're going to look for Emil. So she goes to the meat market, and she called for backup. She called Fury and Juniper. So they like split up, and then Juniper and Hunt like turn up empty-handed, and then Fury shows up, and then Bryce, and like they weren't able to find anything. So they're like, yeah, we do need to go to the bone quarter. Like it was kind of a last ditch effort. And so Hunt asked Juniper, like, because Juniper seems off, and he's like, you know, why do you hate it so much there? And Bryce ends up telling him, like, basically Juniper's brother had been a fighter and got addicted to the Viper Queen's venom and was like in the meat market. And like 10 years ago, he was killed and basically dropped on Juniper's parents' doorstep with a note that said Memento Mori on it. So yeah, she hates it there. So after that, Bryce and Hunt actually do go to the gym, and Bryce is like doing planks and trying to focus. And basically we get some sexy time with Hunt's lightning, which is like, he basically had to return the favor to Bryce. So, you know, and then afterwards they tell each other that they love each other, which is, it's funny because they say it multiple times in this book. Like they have only known each other for like 5 months, but whatever. So that night they go and like they lay in bed, and she tells him like, that's the first time I've ever told like a partner that I like love them. And he tells her that he's loved her since he was locked in that cell in the first book, when Sandria like put all their text messages on like the TV screens and stuff. And they like talk about what they should call each other, and they land on mates. But she tells him like, that's a really intense word, especially for the Fae. Like it basically means like you're married to that person. And like sometimes with the Fae, it's even like on a chemical level that they're bonded. Like a soul bond, but they agree on it. And she's like, my mom is going to throw a fit because we've only known each other for 5 months. And her star like kind of lights in response to him. So Ruhn meets Daybright on the bridge again, and he like basically anytime he falls asleep, he kind of talks to her. So he like fell asleep on Bryce's couch, and so they don't need the crystal to communicate. And they discuss a shipment of like tanks and missiles and weapons coming to the city, and he wants to intercept them and ask about Pippa, which makes Daybright suspicious. So he like kind of moves on. And he admits he works in the Ox, and she's like, that's a stupid thing to reveal. Like, you're telling too much. And she says that the rebels must be blackmailing you to help, because she can tell, like, he's kind of like an upper class person. And he's, or she asks if he's ever been tortured, and she's like, I think you would break, basically. And he's pissed because Ruhn was tortured by his dad, like, growing up. So he's like, that's sensitive for him. So he asked her about Sophie, and she said, don't call her that. We only refer to her as Agent Cypress. And basically says, like, don't ask about her anymore. And ends there, like. So Ruhn tells everybody when he wakes up about the mech suits coming. And Cormac tells Bryce that she needs to start acting like a Fae female in public, because it'll be hard enough to convince people of their engagement. Plus, she smells like Hunt now. And Ruhn like cusses because he's like, oh, y'all are hooking up. Like, I don't want to hear that either. So Hunt makes like dinner reservations and gets a hotel room for them tonight, like after this whole bone quarter thing, so that they can have like a special evening. And Ruhn is going to like work with Cormac and basically invites Ethan to tag along. So like Bryce gets ready and she literally has on this hot pink skirt and like is strapping this gun to her thigh. And she's like, it's hot outside. Like, in a skirt, Bryce? Okay. So they get to like the dock or whatever. And Bryce does end up changing because she like, it wasn't sensible. And Ruhn had also made her take the Star Sword. And so Baxian appears as they're like waiting for the boat. And he's like, what you doing? And he's like, that's not a good idea to go there. And the death marks like smell bad, like the closer they get to the bone quarter. But this boat appears, like there's no captain or steer or anything like that. And it like gets super cold as they approach. And Bryce is confused because like when she saw the bone quarter at the end of book 1, it was like lush and green and beautiful. And basically it like is like barren, gray, like cold, dead, nothing. So they summon the Underking and he's like, why are you here? And he tells them that, you know, I didn't send any Reapers after you. And he tells them like the Reapers originally came from Hell and some of them still reside there. So basically like these are Hell's Reapers. And he says that none of his Reapers are missing. So like you didn't hurt any of them. I didn't send anybody. So she says, where's the pack of devils? And basically what we learned, and this is unfortunate, is that all of the people in the world are like fed this lie about a comfortable lie about death. So everybody thinks like they go to this resting place. That's it. That's not true. What really happens is they go over here and the Underking eats some of their first light and they hang out for a little while until basically all their family die off and people stop thinking about them. And then they go through the gate and then they're turned into second light, which is dead people light, and it's given back to the city. So yeah. And so the Underking tells Bryce that she actually has some extra light because she made her drop outside of a facility. And he says, if I would have known how special you would have been, I wouldn't have basically made that bargain for your soul for Danica. And so Bryce is like, you know, why are you telling us this? And Hunt says, because he doesn't plan on letting us leave. We switch back over to Cormac, Ethan, and Ruhn, and they are in this alley, like, basically trying to, like, interfere with his shipment, but the Dreadwolves and the Harpy and the Hind are in the city now. So they're, like, hiding in the shadows, and Mordok comes down the alley, and he's, like, sniffing, which, again, Mordok is the Hind's second. And Ruhn and Cormac are like, you know, he doesn't know my scent, but Ethan says, well, he knows mine. And they're like, why? And he says, because he's been at the like, den before, because he's Danica's father. Because Mordok is a bloodhound and so is Danica. And we go back over to Bryce and Hunt really fast. So the Underking like leashes this demon hound on them. And it basically was like a project from the Prince of the Ravine that he like left there. And this dog like splits into 3 and like Hunt is like, you know, you need to go run to the river. And he like, you know, powers up basically. So she starts running and then she's like, I'm not leaving Hunt. Like he's my mate. Like I'm not leaving him, whatever. So back over to Ruhn. He basically asks like, okay, does Bryce know that that's Danica's father? And Ethan says no. He says like, you know, Danica never talked about it and like didn't acknowledge him at all. So Mordok says like, you know, he can smell them basically. So Cormac starts like teleporting them out. He takes Ethan first. And Ruhn is basically like in the shadows preparing to attack, but then Cormac comes and gets him at the last minute. And Cormac drops him and Ethan off at a bar to like build some alibi. And so Ruhn just basically asks Ethan like, hey, like, do you want to move in with me and the guys? Like, I know you're a wolf and we're fae and not supposed to get along. And so Ethan's basically like, you know, I'll think about it. And as they're sitting there, the Harpy and the Hind come in. And the Hind is supposed to be like the most beautiful woman ever. And the Hind's like, let's play some cards. Okay. So Hunt is fighting these demons and they merge back into one dog and he hears a scream. And so like the dog chase after Bryce. And so he is like looking for her and like running through the bone quarter. And he finds all these Reapers surrounding her and like they're basically going to siphon her power off. So she like dives for the sword and she like scrapes her face and everything up. And Hunt like appears and he's like roaring like out of the sky. And he literally looks like that statue. Or he probably looks like Thor from Thor Ragnarok when he like flies out of the sky on like that sky bridge and like slams into it. And I love that scene. And that's what I imagine. So anyways, so he like basically goes to throw his lightning and she jumps in front of him and like sucks it all in. And it helps her blast her power. And so one of like or I don't know if the beasts are all together. I don't know. Something grabs him and like slams him into the gate. So Hunt drains like the power from the gate and tells Bryce like, light it up, Bryce, like just like Danica used to. And he shoots Bryce again with his lightning power and then like grabs her and they run for the river. So Therion is like, he's found 2 more bodies and he's updating the River Queen. And he's like, I think it's Pippa, like looking for Emil, and that Emil is probably in the city. And he asks like, you know, why do you want Emil? And she's like, how dare you? Like, why are you questioning me? And he sees lightning in the distance and he's like, yeah, I gotta go. So he like hurries up and like catches up with Hunt with Hunt and Bryce, and he saves them because in the river, so to get to the bone quarter, you take the boat. And like that, they do sailings when you die. And basically, if you're not worthy, the boat tips over. And there's these things in the river called Sobex, and they just like eat you. So like basically, like the Sobex are like they're going to eat Bryce and Hunt if they can't figure out how to get out of the bone quarter. So he like comes and get them on his little boat, and they run to her apartment. And she gets worried because when they get there, Ruhn and Ethan aren't back. So Ruhn is playing cards with the Harpy and the Hind and Ethan. And the Hind basically claims, like, you know, I want to meet you because you're engaged to my sister. And the Hind asks, like, you know, where's your star sword? Which it's with Bryce. And basically it's like, oh, I know. I saw that you slept over at your sister's last night. Like, that's none of your damn business. I can't sleep at my sister's house. And he wonders, like, is she onto them? So then the Hind and the Harpy start talking to Ethan, and the Hind says, like, you know, you basically always wanted Bryce, but your brother was in the way, and you felt guilty when your brother died because the first thought was that you finally had the chance to get to Bryce, and you wish that you would have met her first. Ouch. And he's like, you don't know what you're talking about, which, no, it's kind of true. So as the Harpy and the Hind are, like, basically, like, so the Harpy and the Hind, like, go to leave, and the Hind says, tell Prince Cormac I send my love, and they leave. So Ruhn and Ethan go back to Bryce's apartment, and Hunt is summoned to the comitium due to Ephraim's arrival, like, he's finally here, and Ruhn basically tells him, like, yeah, like, they're already here, like, we saw everybody. So Hunt tells Bryce, like, we're gonna take a rain check on tonight, and Ruhn tells Bryce, like, she smells weird, but he, like, just can't put his finger on it. So Hunt is with Celestina, and she's nervous, and he tells her, like, I'll be by your side all night, like, it's good. So Ephraim comes in, and they have this, like, super awkward kiss, and Hunt wonders, like, if Celestina's ever even been with a male, or if she even prefers males, and wonders if, like, the Asteri even took that into consideration, which I'm sure they didn't. And Bryce tells, like, the boys about the bone quarter back at the apartment, and Ethan wants to check on Connor. Like, he's like, oh my God, which this irritated me the whole book. He's dead! Yeah. I mean, like, I get that it sucks, but, like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And this becomes such a sticking point for him, and I'm like, he's dead. So there's a knock at the door, and because, like, Bryce is talking, whatever, she's not paying any attention. So she opens the door without looking, and she immediately gets choked by Sabine. So Sabine comes in, always calling her, like, a stupid whore, or whatever she calls her, I don't know. And she's basically like, you know, you just can't stay out of wolf business, and Ethan shouldn't be staying here, even though she kicked him out. Like, she just wants him to be living on the streets, basically. So, like, Sabine and Ethan kind of, like, go back and forth. They're, like, growling at each other, even though, like, everyone knows Ethan would lose because Sabine is the alpha, basically. And Ruhn is just standing there like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know. Like, I can't kill Sabine. Like, I don't know. So back with Hunt, he gets a text from Bryce, and she's texting him to let him know Sabine's there. But Bryce changed her name in his phone to Bryce sucks my dick like a champ. And Isaiah sees it, and, like, Hunt's like, oh my God. I cannot. I love, like, all, like, the, like, snarky, silly, goofy stuff in this book. Like, it's so dumb. And Ethan, back with Bryce and them, Ethan basically says, like, because Sabine calls him stupid or dumb, and he's like, well, I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid enough to sleep with Murdoch, and asks if she's going to see him since he's in the city, and asks, like, are they going to go check on their daughter, basically, which Bryce doesn't know. So Bryce is like, oh my God, like, what? And Ethan asks if Danica was a rebel, and Sabine says, are you delusional? No, like, and Bryce tells Sabine that your fear is that I'm going to use my status to replace you with Ethan. And then Hunt walks in, and he, like, has a gun to the back of Sabine's head and is like, don't bother us again. Get out of here. And then Baxian's, like, right behind Hunt. And so Bryce asks Ethan, like, why didn't Danica tell me that? And, like, she's like, you know, we could have related. Like, I have an asshole dad. She has an asshole dad. Like, you know, we could have got along. Like, what the, like, Bryce, Danica sucks, bro. So Isaiah texts Hunt basically saying like, Celestina's upset. You said you would be here all night, and then you left. And Ethan says, I'm going to move in with Ruhn. So Hunt feels bad for bailing on Celestina that night. Like, he's in bed, like, kind of thinking about it. And he tells Bryce, like, I didn't know that we could do that today, like, with our powers and the lightning. And he tells her, like, wherever you go, like, that's where I want to be. So Ethan moves into the frat house, and Ruhn, like, connects with Day again. And she, like, again, she appears with, like, fire. So she reminds him of Lahaba, and it kind of makes him sad. And she, like, asks, and he's like, oh, you just kind of remind me of someone. And he tells her, like, they were almost caught by Mordok today. And she tells him that, her day was hard, and, like, she's never really had a friend. She's really lonely. And they talk about their families and their upbringing. And she tells them that Ophion is planning on attacking the spine and, like, the main, like, places, basically, to kind of, like, overthrow the Asteri. And Ethan, while this is all going on, he sends Therian an otter, which we love the otters. And basically, his fight with Sabine made him miss his wolf form. And he's thinking about how he does have feelings for Bryce. And he did love her, but he feels like he's moving on. And basically, like, so when Connor first met Bryce, he was like, oh, Ethan, like, you need to meet this girl. You need to meet this girl. You need to meet Bryce, da, 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 da. So he goes to the dorm to meet her. And he meets Bryce in the hallway, not knowing that this is the girl. So he, like, immediately was in love with her, was picturing their babies. They were going to grow old together and, like, have a cute little love story. And then Connor came in the hallway and was like, oh, you already met Bryce. So he's like, oh my freaking God. So for years, Connor has wanted Bryce, never did it. And so basically Ethan was like, either ask her out or, like, let her go to somebody else. And he never told Connor, like, that he liked Bryce either, but, like, basically he's like, out of respect for you, like, come on, dude, like, do something. So that's kind of the backstory. But Ethan wants Therian to take him to the bone quarter, and Therian's like, no, like, I don't want to get eaten by the Underking. And Therian says, like, I need to find this kid, so let's try and kill two birds with one stone. So they are going to go to the Mystics. So Bryce is in dance class with Juniper, and she wants Juniper to be principal. And she basically is, like, plotting to, like, how she's going to do that. We switch over to Hunt and Celestina. And so the Harpy basically comes and gets Hunt and says, the pretty one wants you, talking about Celestina. And she's like, yeah, she just got done having sex with Ephraim. I'm like, I don't need to know that. I don't care. And the Harpy just says to Hunt, like, leaving last night is really going to hurt you. So he goes to see Celestina, and basically he's in trouble. So Celestina says that because he left, he is going to be forced to stay in the barracks for 2 weeks. And he's like, I'm just going to quit. And I'm like, Hunt, why didn't you? You could have just quit. I'd have been like, you know what? I quit. That's it. Like, I don't do groundings. You can't ground a grown man. But okay. So as he, like, leaves her office, he runs into the Hind. And the Hind's basically like, you guys have such an interesting friend group. Like, and why do you guys hang out so much? And I'm like, get some friends, Lydia. Maybe you should get some friends. So Bryce tells Therian and Ethan that the Mystics is a bad idea, but they're all going to go. So Ethan basically says, like, we have to go to the Mystics. The Oracles can only see the future. The Mystics can see, like, what's going on right now. And he wants to find out information about his brother. And then, Therian wants to find out about Emil. So they get to the Mystics, and the first thing they see is a bunch of enslaved fire sprites. So, like, that immediately is a no-no. And the guy that's, like, over the Mystics is called the Astronomer. And the Mystics there's 3 of them. There's 1 male, 1 female, 1 both. And they, like, lay in these tanks of, like, murky water with, like, oxygen respirator masks on. And they, like, dive mentally. It's super weird. And basically where these people come from is, like, the Mystics, like, they have some kind of, like, power that they, like, show. But their families typically, like, will sell them to the Astronomer because, like, they need money. And sometimes the Mystics, like, will get too deep into, like, the mental whatever. I don't really know how to explain it. And, like, sometimes they can get lost mentally. And we learned that the Astronomer has an orrery, which is kind of funny because so does the Autumn King and so does Reese in Akatar. So Ethan basically wants to know, like, is my brother still in the bone quarter, or, like, have they already turned him into Second Light? And the Astronomer's like, yeah, that's going to be pricey. And then he pulls out blood salt to, like, do the search or whatever, which is, like, red salt. So the male Mystic is, like, the fast one today, apparently. So he's approaching hell, which doesn't make sense because they're like, okay, well, Connor shouldn't be in hell. And the Mystic asks for Connor, and the response is, no, Wolf is here. But the person asks, like, what are you? And the male says, a Mystic. And we learn that this is Thanatos, which is another prince of hell. And he says, let me see them. And then the Mystic's eyes open. So he's, like, looking at them through the Mystic's eyes. Thanatos says, like, I can smell the starlight. And he's, like, looking right at Bryce. And he tells Bryce, you killed my pet, because she ends up killing that, like, demon dog in the bone quarter. And he says, Connor is in the bone quarter. And Therian asks for a meal, but he says, like, I don't know, basically. And Thanatos says, I'm tired of questions. I shall feast. And then, like, the mystic starts, like, thrashing, basically, because he's trying to eat him. And the astronomer says, like, he snagged him. And the mystic starts, like, begging. And Bryce is like, cut him loose. And then the power goes out. And so Ethan just, like, jumps in the tubs because they start to, like, ice over. And he, like, just pulls them all out. And like the female one starts going like, send me back. And the astronomer's like, they can't exist in this world anymore. Like they're not normal. They can't do that. So they all leave and she like snaps at Therian and is like, that was a horrible idea. Like we're not working with you anymore. Like this is stupid. But they run into, or they actually see Mordok. And he's like, what are you guys doing? But he just kind of leaves. And so, like, Bryce is like, okay, that was a little harsh. And so she turns to Therian and she's like, okay, like, you're my friend, like, whatever. All's good. So Hunt, Isaiah, and Baxian are hanging out in the barracks and they play video games. And Baxian just kind of says, like, Hunt, aren't you popular? And Hunt's like, no. And he's like, well, I mean, like, you have, like, your princess girlfriend, like, your cool, like, job, all this stuff. But he's like, no. And, like, he's like, I'm not popular with the angels, at least. And then, like, Hunt goes back to his sad, lonely room, and him and Bryce have a little phone sex. And she does not tell him about the mystic. So she has been, like, keeping a lot of things from Hunt this book. So Therian asked the River Queen if she knew about the truth of, like, what happens when they die, which she did. And Bryce, in the meanwhile, is practicing with Cormac, trying to learn how to teleport or summon darkness, which she can't do either. And Declan finally got the footage of Danica in the gallery, and he says that they find a moment that was 2 months before Danica's death, where, like, she had been hanging out in the gallery, and, like, Bryce, like, gets kind of teary-eyed because, like, Lahaba's there, and, like, she's talking to Lahaba, and at one point, Lahaba and Bryce, like, walk off. And so, like, Danica waits a couple seconds, and then she runs and grabs this book. And the book is called Wolves and Shifters in History. So she calls Jessica and is like, what is this book? And basically in the book, it's a family tree. And basically Danica had been looking into the Fendir lineage, which Danica Fendir, like that's her family. And so Bryce goes to the Prime and is like, the Prime's like, well, Danica always liked history basically. And the Prime says, like, it's not a secret of where we came from, because she's like, is this not supposed to be known? And he says no, but he says we have forgotten who we came from, and tells her that the reason that we have forgotten is because when we came to this world, we yielded our true nature and basically allowed the Asteri to, like, leash them, and they have forgotten who they are. And he says that Danica might have taken them back to their original form, but she trusted no one except for you, Bryce. And I'm like, did she?
Not enough, apparently.
Yeah.
Because...
I'm like, I don't know that she did. So as she's, like, talking to the Prime, like, she sees Sabine approaching, and she's like, okay, gotta go. And she's like, hey, by the way, ask Sabine about Ethan. And he's like, And she's like, oh, yeah, he kicked her out, or kicked Ethan out and, like, beat the crap out of him, which he didn't know. Because the Prime is, like, super old. Like, he, like, basically kind of has dementia. Like, he kind of goes in and out of it. So she gets back to her apartment, and Cormac is there, like, all bloody. And basically Mordok almost caught him when he went to obtain, like, the mech suit shipment. And he says, like, basically, we need to get Hunt and Therian, like, we need their help. So Juniper calls Bryce, and she's pissed because Bryce decided to use her princess status to get Juniper promoted to principal. And she says, it means absolutely nothing now because, like, I wanted to be principal based off of, like, my work and my work ethic. And now I'm just principal because my friend called and, like, got me that. And so, like, Bryce is like, I'm sorry, like, I really didn't think of it about that way. And she's like, but I have to go. Can I call you later? And Juniper's like, no, like, don't freaking talk to me ever again. So Bryce goes to see Celestina, and she basically is like asking, can I just borrow Hunt for one night so that we can go home to see my parents? And he says, she says, like, they're going to take, like, some train or something to go there fast. But what they're really going to do is go on a mission with Cormac. And basically, like, she kind of, like, talks to Celestina, like a person. And so Celestina is like, she's glad to have Bryce as a friend. And she says she seems genuine. And she tells Bryce, you can take Hunt and keep him home permanently. So she, like, stops by his room and is like, hi, you're going home tomorrow. Like, basically, whatever. So Bryce calls Fury, and Fury's like, I'm not getting into this. Like, I love Juniper. I love you, but you got to give her time. She's devastated. And she also says, like, I'm not getting involved with this stuff with Danica. She's like, I'm in a good place right now. I don't want to jeopardize Juniper's, like, safety. And I'm like, yes, Bryce, this is what you should do. So the Prime calls Ethan and basically, like, he found out everything. And he tells Ethan, like, I can make you the alpha of your own pack if you want to come back. And he's like pissed off about what Sabine did. And Ethan like isn't really sure because he's like, well, like at the end of the day, Sabine would still be my alpha, like over the whole wolves, and she'll end up being the prime. So he's not really sure, but he's like, I'll think about it. So Ethan decides, like an idiot, to go back to the Mystics, and the astronomer is not there, but the female Mystic is there, and she's still out of her tank. And he asks, like, you know, if what the Mystic said about the brother is true, like, is he really not in hell? He's in the bone corner. And she tells him, like, you know, I can't help you. I'm not in the tank, and I don't know how to communicate with the others outside the tank. And he gets close to her, and he can scent her and realizes that she's a wolf. And he cannot believe her pack allowed this. And she says, like, you know, when I was a kid, my powers manifested. I was sold off here. Like, she doesn't even remember her name or anything. And he wants to help her, but she says don't, because, like, the astronomer will know. And he can tell, like, not only is she a wolf, but she's meant to be an alpha. And she can't even stand up because she spent, like, years in this tank, basically. So he grabs, on the way out, the box of fire sprites. And there's, like, some rings that the astronomer wears. So he grabs that. And she's like, he is going to kill you, but he like is pissed, so he takes it anyways. So Therian tells the River Queen that there's going to be a shipment of mech suits and that he is going to need help with it, but she's like, no, you can go by yourself. And he says, like, you know, should I say goodbye to your daughter first? And she says, you've done enough, basically. Such a weird relationship. And so Ruhn is back on the bridge with Day, and they're talking about, like, having sex, and, like, she says, you seem like a dominant male. And he's like, I am, but I like to let the females choose. He's, like, very, like, a feminist. And she asks, like, are you a wolf because of your, like, dominance? He's like, no. And he tells her, like, she seems like she would be a part of Sky and Breath, but not a wolf. So they are planning on going to do a mission tomorrow with Cormac, Therian, Ruhn, Hunt, and Bryce. They're all going to do a mission. And he's, like, telling Day this. And Day tells him, like, you need to be careful. If they catch you, like, you just need to run. Don't try to fight them. It'll be terrible for you. And then she disappears, like, suddenly. And he chases after her. But he realizes that she's having sex, but it's, like, not pleasant. Like, she's not enjoying this. And then she comes back afterwards and she's like, you know, I agreed to it. He woke me up, basically, and, like, whatever. She's like, I hate him and he disgusts me. And so Ruhn's like, okay, so then why are you having sex with him? And she says, like, have you not ever had sex with someone you hated? And he's like, well, yes. But he's like, you know, I want to meet you. And she says, that's never going to happen. And then she leaves. She goes to leave and Ruhn's like, no, like, stay here and, like, rest, basically. So the team's, like, all, like, suited up to go scope out this mech suit delivery the next day, and Pippa is there, and they argue with her because Pippa has no, like, morals. Like, she tortures anybody, kills anybody, doesn't care if they're kids or humans or whatever. She has no morals. So Hunt realizes that these suits have Gorsian stones in them, and so basically they can, like, pull power from, like, the ground, and basically these suits will, like, never run out of battery. And he's like, they need to be destroyed. And Pippa's like, no, I'm excited. Like, you know, I want to use the suits. And Hunt says that this is a death machine. And she's like, well, what's the difference than, like, using a gun, basically? And Pippa says, like, Emil is no longer my priority because he's hiding somewhere, but the suits, like, negate the need for him, basically. And while they're doing all this, Ophion, like, starts to attack and kill all of the Vanir that had helped them, like, get the suits. And everybody's like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, like, we can't really, like, chance them, like, telling on us, basically. So Hunt basically asks, like, does Pippa know where Emil is? And Bryce is, like, weirdly quiet while he's doing that. He's like, Bryce knows something, but I'm gonna circle back to that later. So Ruhn and Hunt, like, won't let Pippa just, like, they're like, she cannot just come into our city and attack. Because, again, she'll kill everybody. She doesn't care about innocent lives. So Hunt starts, like, blasting everything with lightning. But Cormac's like, there are missiles. Like, you cannot just do that. And Cormac tries to, like, tell the other rebels there, like, you know, this is an accident. But they shoot Cormac with a bullet. So he can't teleport them out of there. And so Bryce starts, like, blinding everybody with their light so that they can leave. And Cormac says, like, you know, they're going to hunt us down. They're going to kill us. So Bryce snaps at Therian and says, like, you know, you guys are all no better than Philip Briggs. And, like, I'm done helping you guys. And then they see Baxian and he says the Hind is probably not far behind. So they need to get the bullet out of Cormac so he can teleport them, but there's not enough time. So they're trying to figure out what to do. They get on these boats and they're trying to get away. And they get, like, flipped into the water, basically. And, like, Bryce is like, I can use my power, but Hunt's like, no, then they'll know it's you. So, like, the Hind is approaching, and Hunt's like, I could fry them, but they're in water. Like, obviously, he'll electrocute all of them. So, basically, they have no choice. So, the Hind, like, comes up to them, and she's like, what a surprise to see you here. And she's basically like threatening all of them like individually, and she says how interesting it is of all these people in all their positions to be here. And she talks about how she killed Sophie, and she drops the same stone in the water that she dropped in the water with Sophie. And so then like a mega boat start approaching, and they're like, Hunt's like, Bryce, you have to run. Of course, Bryce doesn't want to. But then something even bigger is coming in the water, and they're like, that's not an Omega boat. So Hunt is literally like surging with power. Like he is like firing up, and he's like, I will kill everyone in this water just to save Bryce. But I'm like, okay, well, Bryce is also in the water. Right. So chill out. And Ruhn is like, it's so interesting because he acts like a mated male. And they hear someone shout for them to like get down the hatch now. And so they all run and they jump in this airlock of this boat. And Hunt is still like fuming. Like he has not calmed down. And the lady's like, we don't mean any harm. We aren't Ophian. Like, we're good. And the female Asteri, like, did you call for us? And he's like, no. And she's like, well, the light. And Bryce is like, oh, it was my light. So Ruhn, like, mind speaks to Bryce and is like, you have got to get Hunt to chill out. Like, he looks exactly like he did the day when he killed Sandriel. And he says he's acting like a mate when his mate is in danger. He tells her, like, that's what's different about your scent. Your scent has merged with Hunt's. You guys are mates. And the female, her name is Sindez, she welcomes them into the depth charger and lets them know that this is the Ocean Queen's boat and it's part of the House of Many Waters. So Mark like is grilling Ethan back at their apartment because not only did he break into the astronomers, but he stole the rings. And he's like, okay, well, theft of a slave is illegal, so there's that. And they look in the rings and it's filled with like fire sprites. They all look like Lahaba. So one of them grabs a hammer and they're like, okay, let's just work them out. So they smash this hammer and they all like fall out. So not only are there 4 fire sprites, but there's a dragon inside one of these rings. So they get into we're back with the group in the boat, and Ruhn is like, I cannot believe that Bryce and Hunt are mates. Like, that's just crazy. And so the ship is like, the people are still trying to assure them, like, we're not Ophian. And they start like showing them around the ship, and like the ship can like camouflage in the water, and Hunt is still fuming. Like, he still has not calmed down. So Bryce is like, can I take him to this like biodome? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. And like they close it off temporarily. So Bryce and Hunt actually have sex for the first time, which calms him down, and she teleports at the end of it, and they end up back in the airlock. So we go back to Ethan and the guys, and he like is introducing himself to the fire sprites. There's 4 of them. Like, we get all of their names, but I didn't write those down. But then the dragon is like really standoffish, and she's like was like on fire, but now she's like not burning anymore. And she tells them that her name is Ariadne. So Flynn asks, like, how did you guys all fit in the rings? And one of the fire sprites says, like, don't trust the astronomer. He's an ancient sorcerer. Like, don't let him deceive you. He bought us and forced us in there to help him, like, descend into hell, basically. And the dragon has something on her arm that prevents her from shifting. And she says she can only shift if the astronomer allows her. And if he does, he'll be able to track her. So back on the boat, Cormac gets the bullet removed. And Bryce tells him, like, about her teleporting. And he says, you teleported because your powers merged. And Sindez basically tells them that they picked up Sophie's dead body. So Sophie is dead. So Cormac goes to the morgue and, like, you know, he's pretty sad. He says, like, I feel like I always knew, but he had hope. And she has, like, these numbers carved into her. And it seems like she did it when she was drowning. And, like, Cormac doesn't know what they mean. So basically, like, they ask about the Ocean Queen, like, what's her deal, basically, and she kind of, like, wants to overthrow the Asteri, and so they're like, okay, she wants to be, like, the new leader, and they're like, no, like, she wants to go back to the time before the Asteri, like, when they had leaders who were actually elected. And Therion wants to take Sophie's body, and the female, Sindez, is like, does the River Queen have necromancers? Like, she assumes he wants to, like, raise her body, and she basically says, like, we don't have any claim to her body, but Cormac obviously does, so, like, that would be up to him. So Ruhn connects with Day again mentally, and she seems like worried, and she's like, I heard about the attack. And he tells her, like, you know, everything that Pippa did and that Sophie is actually dead. And he asks her, like, well, why do you work with Pippa if you hate her? And she says, because she's the only one leading the cause, and that, you know, there's basically bigger fish to fry. And so Ruhn tells her about the oracle prediction that he got, like his true prediction, which says that he would be the end of his Fae line. And he tells her, like, he basically assumes, like, he's never going to have children or that he's going to die early because the line ends with him. And he says, like, hopefully I don't die and I'm just shooting blanks. And that is the end of part 2. So we are going to stop there. And we will do parts 3 and 4 next week. So there's no summary or anything at the end of this. So we're going to just jump into it next week. So make sure that you are following us again on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Booktrospective. And make sure that you share our episodes with a friend and that you rate and review them and leave us comments because we love all the feedback. And I think that's it.
That's it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.